Yes.
Okay.
Excellent. Yes.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay. Let's see how I can move, but I cannot move.
I think you can move it.
Not yet.
Clicking at the bottom, you can see an arrow at the right and arrow at the left.
Sadly, not yet. No.
Not yet.
No.
If you use your cursor at the bottom of your slide, you can find it, I think.
No, sadly, there is no arrow.
No.
No.
Please use the arrow key of your keyboard if it helps.
Yes. Nope. Perhaps I change the browser. Perhaps this helps. Sometimes this helps. I don't know.
I can change your slide from my desktop if you are happy with it.
No, also with another browser, I have no cursor.
No.
No. Perhaps can you change the slides?
Sorry.
Can you change the slides?
Yes, I
Okay.
can do it. If you are happy with it,
Yes.
I can do it.
Yes. Yes. So try to go to.
Yeah.
Yes. Excellent. Let's go back.
Okay?
Yes. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. No, it's not normal. It's not my wife.
Okay. Well,
You can say when we should start.
we can start in a few minutes.
Yes. Yes. No rush.
Okay. Are we start, Dr. Brian?
Yes, I can. I
Okay.
can start. Yes.
Hello, everybody. This is my honor to introduce Mr. Serge Brian, who is the professor of psychology at the Basel University in Switzerland. And he has been working on several aspects of psychology and psychiatry, including physical activity. And he has had several papers in this area. And now we have this honor to listen to his talk about physical activity and general appearance and image in adolescents with eating disorder. I'm sure his lecture would be informative and will benefit from his talk. Dr. Brown, please.
Okay. So thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for participating. So the topic is physical activity, appearance, body image, self-esteem, and also eating disorder behavior in adolescence. So what you see on the very first slide is the actress of the Queen's Gambit. And what we immediately see that she appears to be particularly beautiful. Okay, next slide. So to introduce the frame, why we are so eager on beauty and symmetry, then I have to go back to some elements of the evolutionary psychology. We know that early adolescence and young adulthood is more than only a pastime. And then the next question is, what is beauty good for? And why do we strive for symmetry? And what is this body shape and how to shape the body shape? The next question is if media are the causes or the consequences or both of formula of facial beauty and body shape. And then I will show you some evidence from studies we have run in Iran. So next slide. First, I do define what is adolescence, and early adulthood. So from a developmental stage, it is a period in the lifetime, and it is the stage between childhood and adulthood. And an adolescent is not a child anymore, but not yet an adult. So the question is, what is adolescence good for? And the answer is very simple. Adolescence is a time lapse for exercise. But then the question is, what should be exercised? And exercise is me that, no, you can go to the next. Thank you. So we should prepare during adolescence to get economically, socially, emotionally, and cognitively independent from the parents and the core family. This does not mean that we cut with the parents and the core family, but that we build up independence to get our own identity and individuality. Further, points on our values and future plans, such as jobs or relations. It is also important to exercise how to build up a stable relationship outside the family, uh, and with friends and peers, and also to exercise how does it work to build up an intimate relationship. So basically, from the evolutionary point of view and from the developmental psychology point of view, adolescence and early adulthood serves as a playground, an exercising ground to get adult and then to start the game. Next slide. So, when does adolescence start and when does it end? So, the start is quite easy to define because the starting point is when the first menstruation starts or the first ejaculation starts. So, beginning of the adolescence is quite easy to define. In the next slide, in the next slide, yes, we see the relationship between age and age at a menarche. If do you see that I move the cursor? No? Okay, at any rate, on the x-axis we have the ages from 1830 to 1990. And on the epsilon axis, we have the ages at menarche. And data are taken from Germany, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, US, and UK. So what the graph clearly shows us that within the time lapse of about 160 years, the age at menarche did decrease from the age of 17 to the age of about 11. So this means that compared to the time of 106 years ago, the onset of adolescence is much earlier. Next slide. And then when does adolescence end? And here the borders are not as nice as the start or the onset of adolescence. Because, for example, Arnett in 2004 defined the time lapse of emerging adulthood. So this time lapse between 18 years and 25 years. To say that there is not a need to transfer from adolescence to adulthood, but there is somehow a step in between. Why is it so? We know that education lasts much longer, both for males and females. And above all, economic crisis, getting economically independent is delayed. And the delay means also that there is a delay to building up family and having children. And in modern societies, young people, young adults have much more options for planning life, values, and identity. Next slide. So when we take the developmental tasks defined or described by Havikhurst in 1948 and then in 1975, perhaps you say, this is archaeology. Why do we talk about dinosaurs? Nevertheless, we see that such developmental tasks still persist in all societies, also in Western societies where developmental plans got somehow more flexible. What do adolescents do? So they achieve and the more mature relationships with age mates of both sexes. They achieve a role, a social role, a female or a masculine social role. They do accept their own body changes. They achieve emotional independence of parents and other adults. And they prepare for marriage and marry a family life. They prepare for an economic career. They acquire a set of values and ethical system, and they also achieve a socially responsible behavior. Next slide. What do young adults do? Always according to Harry Kirst. So they select a mate, they achieve a social role as a woman or a man, they learn how to live with a marriage partner. Who is married knows that it is a long-term challenging task. Then they start a family, they rear children and manage the home. They get started in an occupation and they find also their social group. Next slide. So the late adolescence and young adulthood is basically a sort of exercising to find out the individual fit within a social context. And above all, if one task is to find a partner, then it's also the task of adolescents and early adults to find its own mating value. So it is also a topic of impress the opposite sex and above all to cope with competitors. Okay, next slide. The question arises, why are beauty and symmetry good for? And basically, they are indicators of strong and excellently working genes and a healthy human system. Next slide. We see the opposite in such cases as cleft lip and palate. You have here three, or go back, sorry. Sorry. You see that you have graphs, what it might mean, a cleft lip and a palate. And we also know when we see the image on the right bottom corner that the cleft and the symmetry of cleft and the face develop in between the 4th and the 17th week of gestation. So basically it means that nature and our genes must work excellently to achieve such kind of symmetry. On the next slide, we see what it means when symmetry is not achieved. These pictures are taken from a colleague of mine, and he is a surgeon, cleft surgeon, and he goes regularly to Cambodia to do surgery, cleft surgery, for free. And as you also see, it's not only a question of small children or infants or toddlers, but also adults with a cleft left and palate. On the left side, you see a young 22 years old lady before surgery. Then in the middle picture, you see the first surgeries and attempts to correct. And on the right side, you see exactly the same young lady after successful surgery. So we see that people, and we all are shaped, that we are very, very sensitive to symmetry and above all to facial symmetry, and we are particularly sensitive to asymmetry, because asymmetry by definition means that something went wrong in the development. On the next slide, you see pictures of a 3 months old female baby. She had a double-sided cleft, and she underwent surgery here in Basel. And you see on the right side the same girl at the age of 13, and you see that these surgeons, cleft surgeons, actually made an excellent job in correcting her cleft and her facial symmetry. You might imagine that otherwise, having such clefts, what it must mean when you go to kindergarten, when you go to school, when you go to high school, and you have such a asymmetry in your face. Most probably, you will suffer from social rejection. Okay, on the next slide. The question is it new that we strive for beauty and symmetry? And the answer is clearly no. While on the left side, we say the actress Anya Taylor-Joy in the movie The Queen's Gambit, and we see her face particularly symmetric. She has a wide distance from the eyes. She has clear skin, a small nose, full lips. And actually, this is not new. At least we see on the statue of Nefertiti, which is now 3,340 years old, that also Egyptians at that time, in that age, were particularly sensitive to symmetry. Actually, when we look at the face and the head of Nefertiti, we can say that she has an absolutely symmetric face, full lips, a nice nose, and open and wide eyes. Next slide. So when you have to decide to whom would you borrow some money, the guy on the left, the guy in the middle, or the guy on the right? How would you decide? If you had to decide right now, within 1 second. Okay, so a lot of people say, I would borrow some money to the guy on the left side. The young one who looks somehow shy and insecure, but the one in the middle and above all the one on the right do not seem very reliable and honest. So it's important that we know that we have some implicit biases on beauty and personality. And this does not always match reality. Actually, the gentleman on the right guy is Fitzgerald. He has written The Great Gatsby and has won the Nobel Prize in Literature in the 20s. And the guy in the middle is a German author, Rainer Maria Rilke, and he was forced to be soldier during the First World War, and so this perhaps is the reason why he does not look too happy. And the one on the left side, who looks somehow shy and insecure, is Josef Mengele. And we know him that he is the most cruel medical doctor the Nazi had during the Second World War. In the next slide, the question is, which couple is the criminal couple? The one in the middle, the one in the right, and the one on the left. And most people say the couple in the middle, or some other people say the one on the right. but most do not opt for the couple on the left because they look somehow young, they look happy, they look relaxed, and it somehow does not match our imagination that they might be criminals. But actually, this is really Bonnie and Clyde, and they are know that they killed a lot of people in the 20s in the US. Okay, next slide. If you have to decide quickly, who is the murderer? Most people say the lady on the left. And when you then ask why, they say, yes, she does not look very gentle. She's not reliable. Most probably she's not honest. And she does not agree to consent. On the next slide, we have asked our students, so listen, both are the murderer. And we split our students in three groups. In the first group, they have just seen these houses, and such houses you can see all over Europe. So basically, they're very unpersonal. And then the second group had the portrait of this lady from whom both females and males say she is not very attractive. She does not look very gentle. She has somehow a rejecting behavior. And on the third group, we showed this picture of this young, somehow attractive and nice-looking person. And the key question was, how many years of jail do you give her? And depending from the picture the students have seen, you will see dramatic changes in the number of years going to prison. On the next slide, you see in the first condition where we asked how many years of jail and we presented these houses, very impersonal. On average, students gave her 14 years of prison. In the second condition, students on average gave her 10 years of prison. And in the third condition, on average, students, and importantly, both males and females, gave her still about 7 years. 7 years. So it means that we are highly biased by faces. We are highly biased if faces express something like symmetry, like honesty, like reliability, and above all also beauty. And you see, it makes a huge difference if you end up in prison for 7 years or for 14 years. So it's a huge impact on your life. So the key, the bottom line for you is whenever you get criminal, please look very nice on the photograph. This might save you a lot of years out of jail. Of course, this was a joke. And by the way, no, go back, please. Go back. And by the way, this lady on the right side wearing an orange pullover is actually really a serial killer, and she is imprisoned in the US. So we see that somehow it hurts us, or we cannot match it together, that beauty, symmetry, and criminality should match together. But again, don't always judge the book by its cover, or in other words, we have implicit concept that symmetry and beauty must be related to some personality traits, which of course is not always the case. On the next slide, we see again the actress on Taylor-Joy in the movie The Queen's Gambit, an excellent movie broadcasted on Netflix. And we see also that she's wearing a very nice dress. And this very nice dress is important because this dress stresses her body shape. Specifically, this dress underlines the waist, a small waist, and larger hip. On the next slide. Oh, I'm so sorry. Here, I have forgotten to delete selfie, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But okay, when you look closely, you see that the underwear has the brand, the market of CR7. So it's the body of Cristiano Ronaldo. And you see, he does not only earn a lot of money, he is not only an excellent football player, but he is also, from an evolutionary point of view, he has an excellent body. Okay, continue, please. So what does it mean? It means that we are shaped to look at body shapes and to attribute such body shapes to specific attributes. While on the left side, we have again the actress Taylor-Joy in the movie of The Queen's Gambit. We see on the right side Daniel Craig in the figure of James Bond. And he too, the body shape is very athletic, very masculine, very smart, very strong. And of course, he too he has an excellently symmetrically face. And this triggers in us the concept of reliability, honesty, and consent. On the next slide. We have now the concept of waist to hip ratio. We have on the right side custom dress typically for Oktoberfest in Munich. And we see that the dress is made to shape and to underline the small waist and larger hips. On the left side, we have 4 bodies. These are avatars, just to say, these are computerized body shapes. These are not photographs taken from real females. And we have them also labeled with the BMI. So if on the left side, we have, for example, a young girl, a young adolescent with a BMI of 17.5, we see that the waist is very small, hips are larger. Then the second on the left with a BMI of 22. Again, the waist is smaller and hips are larger. And then we see that if somebody has a BMI of 30, so this waist to hip ratio tilts in the meaning that the waist is larger compared to the hips. And this is even more true when the BMI is 40 or higher, so highly obese. So what does it mean? What does it mean when we skip to the next slide? We know, for example, that since 1920, Miss America always have a waist to hip ratio of 0.7. So this means that the waist compared to the hips is smaller. And if you see this picture on the right from Egyptian women, and this picture is about 4,000 years old, and we see that also on such pictures, the waist to hip ratio is such that the waist is smaller compared to the hips. So again, this idea of the waist to hips ratio is not new, but it's rooted at least within the last thousands of years in our culture. We also know that a high waist to hip ratio, when the waist is much larger compared to the hips, such women have an increased risk. I underline an increased risk. It's not to say that they have for sure such diseases, but they have an increased risk for diabetes, for stroke, for lower fertility, and for abortion. So we see that waist to hip ratio towards a smaller ratio has also a root in health, physical health. On the next slide, at least in Western cultures, we have these so-called corsets. And 2 years ago, there was even an exposition in a museum in Basel about corsets, the shapes, colors, fabrics, and so on. And basically, the function of such corsets is always to increase the waist to hip ratio, such that the waist is much smaller compared to the hips. On the next slide, we see that this concept is not new. Again, it has evolutionary rooted concepts. We see here on the left the lady from Auxerre, a statue perhaps 60 centimeters high, and it's currently at the Louvre in Paris, but it has been built 2,670 years ago in Creta, so an island in Greece. So what we see is that this lady is wearing a belt around her waist, also again to underline this ratio between waist, a small waist, and larger hips. So again, it's not new. It's not a fashion from Western culture. It's not a fashion from our media to promote a small, a low waist to hip ratio, but we see that it is rooted already in former cultures. When we continue in the next slide, the question is, are there also exceptions? Are there cultures or time lapses where the waist to hip ratio, a small waist to hip ratio, was not advised or wished? And the answer is yes. We have on the left side a picture of a harem of a Persian Shah, and we see that these ladies are overweight, if not to say obese. So it seems that for some times, in some cultures, in some time lapses, so highly overweight females were regarded as particularly attractive and sexy. Currently, still in Mauritania, so an African country on the west side of Africa, in the lower part from Morocco and Algeria, we see that young ladies, as we see on the right side, are forced to eat up to 20,000 kilocalories per day to increase dramatically their weight. So the concept behind is that if a young lady is highly overweight or obese, this means that she has a lot of food available and that she is allowed not to eat as much as she can. And on the flip side, she's not forced to work. She's not forced to go to work on the camp, on the agriculture, or to care for animals. So a highly overweight or obese young adult, female adult, at least in Mauritania, is the mirror to say there is a lot of financial resources behind. But again, these two exceptions are exceptions, and by definition, exceptions do underline the rule. Okay, the next slide. The question is, how should we keep a slim body shape? And basically, you have three options. First, you have genes such that you have a leptosomic body shape, so tall and very slim. So if you have this genetic makeup for a leptosomic body shape, say thank you to your parents. It was not your fault, it's not your efforts, but you have chosen well your parents. The second strategy is to increase your physical activity, and the third is to restrict the calorie intake. So basically, we have two strategies if we want to shape our body. Either we increase the physical activity to burn more calories, or we decrease the calorie intake, or the combination of both increased physical activity and restricted calorie intake. On the next slide, the question is, do media promote frames of beauty? And the answer is a clear yes and a clear no. Because we see from other cultures, 3, 4, 2,000 years ago, that the concept of beauty, of facial symmetry, of a low waist to hip ratio is not new. Sadly, here one image of the Venus of Milo is missing. I don't know why, but you can Google and you can see that this Venus of Milo is a beautifully shaped young lady, and this statue is about 2,200 years old. And you see again also in her body shape that the waist to hip ratio is about 0.7. So as also Miss America every year we have since 2019 and 20. On the next slide, the key question is, so what does media do? Media such as movies, such as social network sites. Social network sites are Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, or similar social network sites. And the question is, do they promote such frames? And the answer is yes, they do promote. But also media, they are not stupid. They just, given that they want to sell their products, they just shape their products in relation to the needs and wish of their customers. So basically, media do reflect and promote what is in our mind, what is symmetry, what is beauty, what is a nice body shape. We have excellent study run by Becker in 2000, published by Becker in 2004, and Becker and his colleagues in 2016. And what did they do? They assessed female adolescents on the Fiji Islands. So Fiji Islands are a small islands, a group of islands in the Pacific, in between somehow Australia and South America. And strangely and funnily, until 1998, they didn't have TV. So it means Becker and his colleague had excellent opportunities to assess and investigate, is there an impact of media on a female adolescent's behavior? And the answer is yes. And what was the change? The change was that from 1998 on, female adolescents started to copy behavior of US American actresses. And so they adapted the behavior of US American ladies as regards body shape, as regards food intake, as regards dieting, and as regards also behavior in sort of to show or not to show emotions. So from this point of view, we can say that at least on Fiji Islands, the TV and the concepts, the frameworks of beauty, of body shape, and female behavior had an impact on young adolescent females in these Fiji Islands. And so we can say that yes, media also may have an impact on the way um, our mind is shaped. Next slide. However, Kirsch et al. In 2016 run a study, and they made an MRI study, and they assessed young adults. It's important to underline that they assessed both female and male young adults. So it has not a gender bias in it. So what they did is they assessed the functional brain changes depending from pictures participants did look at. And as soon as very beautiful, symmetric faces were shown, or nicely shaped bodies, such as the body of the actress we have seen on the Queen's Gambit, or a body shape as Ronaldo, or as Daniel Craig in the role of James Bond. In both males and females, the limbic system, that is a system in the brain highly associated with reward and motivation and with dopamine secretion, started to be highly more active. So to conclude, if also in the MRI study, beautiful faces and beautiful body shapes have the power to change activity in basic brain areas of reward and motivation. This means that our brain is shaped since at least 100,000 years ago to be particularly sensitive to beauty, to symmetry, to nice body shapes, both female body shapes, but also male body shapes. I really want to underline that also in this study of Kirsch in 2016, females reward system got highly activated when they were looking at nice body shapes, as I have shown you before, the nice body shape of Cristiano Ronaldo or Daniel Craig. So it's not only a male brain topic or issue, but also females are quickly attracted by nicely shaped bodies of males. This gives us the summary that beauty, symmetry, and nice body shapes are not inventions of modern fashion, are not inventions of Western lifestyle. They are not culture specific, but this is rooted in our evolution, at least within the last 100,000 years. Next slide. We were curious to know more about this interplay between sociocultural attitudes towards appearance, self-esteem, symptoms of body dysmorphic disorders, and among young adults. To this end, my very dear colleagues in Hamadan, so namely Professor Muhammad Ahmad Pana and Professor Muhammad Hariri, run a study. I'm sorry, I forgot also Professor Leila Jahangard, and of course our very diligent, smart, and hardworking postdoc, Dr. Dena Sadari Mahwani. We run this study. On the next slide, you see the makeup of this study. We assessed 350 people. The mean age was about 25 years old, and 77% of participants were females. So basically, we assessed students, but the sample size was quite large. What did they do? They completed questionnaires on social cultural attitudes towards appearance and self-esteem. So what is social cultural attitudes towards appearance? This questionnaire asks, what is my ideal body shape? How do I want to look like? And what are the pushes behind? Is it that my peers say I should increase my body shape? Is it because I wish to increase my body shape to please to my peers or to attract females or males? Or is it my parents that they say I'm too overweight or whatsoever? Or are it media? Or am I impressed by athletes, professional athletes? Exactly. So this questionnaire assessed have media and other people an impact on my way I would like to look like. Then again, we assess self-esteem, and experts rated signs of body dysmorphic disorder. So it's important to underline, we did not do a diagnosis following the ICD-10 or ICD-11 or the DSM-5, but we just rated the dimension, continuity in between being fully happy with my body shape, my body composition, and my figure, or am I completely unhappy and dissatisfied with my body shape and wishing to change it as quickly as possible? So the results were as follows. Body dysmorphic disorders and social cultural attitudes towards appearance had a correlation coefficient of 0.31. Or in another way, the R squared is 0.09, or this equals to 9%. So in other words, the variation of body dysmorphic disorder was able to explain the variation of social cultural attitudes towards appearance by only 9%. Or the other way around, body dysmorphic disorders and social cultural also dimensions of body dysmorphic disorders and social cultural attitudes towards appearance were basically not related. This was the first very surprising result. The second result was that the dimensions of body dysmorphic disorders and self-esteem were completely unrelated. We have a correlation coefficient from 0.04, and you know, a correlation coefficient of 0.04 is nothing. You can just flip the coins or throw the dice. You have a better result. So this was the second very impressive result that we could say, even if a person has the impression that he or she should change or desires to change the body shape, this was absolutely not related to self-esteem. Next slide, please. The first results I already have introduced. And the third result was that sociocultural attitude towards appearance and self-esteem did also not correlate. So the impression to want a body shape following others person's idea or by media and self-esteem were absolutely not related. You see, or we see that a correlation coefficient from 0.14 and the R squared is 0.0196 or about 2%. So this means that self-esteem, the variance of self-esteem, did explain only 2% of the variance of sociocultural attitudes towards appearance. Or in other words, self-esteem and sociocultural attitudes towards appearance or dimensions of body dysmorphic disorders were completely unrelated. The conclusions were so that self-esteem is not related to sociocultural attitudes towards appearance, and it is not related to body dysmorphic disorders. So we see that self-esteem is somehow a tricky thing. A tricky thing. Sadly, we cannot say that high self-esteem means happiness, satisfaction with body shape, or vice versa. I'm sorry. Data and reality is more complicated. No, no, go back. No, no, go ahead, go ahead. Thank you. So the second bottom line is here in red is that other factors appear to be important for self-esteem, social cultural attitudes towards appearance, and signs of body dysmorphic disorders. We do not know which other factors are important because we cannot turn back the study and we cannot reassess these people. But we think that dimensions of career planning, dimensions of feedback from peers, and physical activity might have a higher impact on self-esteem and social-cultural attitude towards appearance than signs of body dysmorphic disorders. Next slide. In August, we were able to publish a very nice study, and this study was run in Tabriz. So the former study with professors Ahmad Pana and Hariri was run in Hamadan. This study was run in Tabriz. And I thank warmly my very nice colleagues, Sayed Hojat and Zara. They were for a couple of months also in Basel as fellows, and it was a very nice experience. And we are still working excellently together. Of course, also our PhD and now postdoc fellow Dr. Dena Sadari Bahmani was involved. So what did we do? Our question was, is self-esteem related to symptoms of eating disorder behaviors among female adolescents? And if you have to answer to this question, what would you say? What is your spontaneous, intuitive reaction? Exactly. We also expected that symptoms of eating disorder behavior must be related to self-esteem in a way that the lower the self-esteem is, the higher must be symptoms of eating disorder behavior. Because there's sufficient data to show that above all, when females, adolescents with clinically diagnosed eating disorders, they show highly decreased scores of self-esteem. But this pattern of result is not consistent. It's very important. There are also sufficient data to show that somehow symptoms of eating disorder behavior and self-esteem are not related. So somehow you can take a coin, a flip, a throw, or throw the dice, and then you have the relation between self-esteem and symptoms of eating disorder behavior. Okay, what were the results? And the results on our next slide. We assessed 263 female adolescents. They were about 16 years old, and they completed a series of self-rating questionnaires on self-esteem, eating disorder behavior, and body image. Again, it's important to underline that these data were taken from self-rating questionnaires. We did not run a psychiatric interview, a psychiatric diagnosis to give a diagnosis following the DSM-5. But these are all data from self-ratings. And it's also important to underline that eating disorder behavior is not it's not in the meaning of categories. So do I suffer from anorexia nervosa? Yes, no. Or do I suffer from bulimia? Yes, no. Do I suffer from binge eating? Yes, no. But we have taken this as a dimension, as a metric dimension. So, and results were really devastating at the first glance. At the first glance. At the second glance, we were very happy. Why were we very happy? Because the correlation between self-esteem and eating disorder behavior was 0.59. So it means the higher the self-esteem, the higher dimension of eating disorder behavior. And this was some counterintuitive, but when you ask clinical psychologists or psychiatrists, how easy or how difficult is it to treat young female adolescents with eating disorders, they all, practically all, will tell you this is a very tough job. And here we see why. Because given that nobody is stupid, why should I give up a strategy which gives me self-esteem? And most probably, this is the key reason why treatment, psychological treatment, psychotherapeutic treatment of young females, adolescent females with eating disorder behavior are so difficult to find, to see progress and to see success. Because if this gives them self-esteem, a higher self-esteem, why should they be so stupid to renounce to a strategy which gives them self-esteem? We have also seen that a higher increase of physical activity was related to higher eating disorder behavior. And somehow this makes sense in terms that this is what we see regularly also in other studies, that highly active female adolescents want to keep their body slim, highly in shape, and also show signs of dieting and calorie intake restrictions. And we have also seen that physical activity was related to self-esteem. Self-esteem. This makes also sense because this is actually a result we emphasize always when we propose physical activity, exercising interventions to improve symptoms of depression or anxiety or other psychiatric diagnoses, because physical activity is very honest. It's very honest. If you do walk for 30 minutes from the hospital home, or you bike, or you go to the gym and you sweat and you work out for 60 minutes, so you can say this is your effort, only your effort. It's not about your shoes, it's not about the nice weather, nothing. But you did sweat, you did expend energy because you did it. So it's highly wished and expected that physical activity levels and self-esteem should be associated. Next slide. On a third study, we also performed in Tabriz. We asked again, what is the relation between physical activity and self-esteem? And on the next slide, you have here the summary. Again, this study was performed together with my colleagues Hojat and Zara in Tabriz, from the University of Tabriz. And we assessed 264 participants. And importantly, the mean age was about 38 years. So we do not talk about anymore about adolescents. We do not talk about young adults, where the mating pressure is particularly high, but we talk about adults at the border of early adulthood. You see here in table 3 the correlation coefficients between PA, physical activity, BMI, then the PPF is perceived physical fitness, BI is body image, and SA is self-esteem. So what we see in the first column, the higher the physical activity scores, the lower the BMI, the higher the perceived physical activity fitness, the lower the body image. And lower body image means here a body image towards a slimmer body image, and the higher the self-esteem. Again, with the studies published in 2016, I'm sorry, I made here a mistake. Yes, so in the 2016, also among adults at the end, at the border of 14 years old, we could replicate that physical activity scores were highly related to self-esteem. Next slide. Here again should be Zaman Izani 2016, not 2020. I'm sorry for this mistake. We do not have to understand this graph in all details. But on the left side, we have PA, physical activity scores. And on the right side, we have SA, so self-esteem. And we see physical activity did directly impact on higher self-esteem, and physical activity did also indirectly impact on self-esteem via lower BMI, via higher as perceived physical fitness, and via a slimmer body image. So basically, with the study published in 2016, Zaman Izani and his colleagues could show that physical activity scores did both directly and indirectly impact on self-esteem. Next slide. Okay, so what are the take-home messages? Number one, beauty and symmetry are not new cultural inventions. Beauty and symmetry appear to reflect high-end engineering and good genes and a well-working immune system. Media and above all social network sites such as Instagram, Facebook, Telegram, and so on, they just promote what customers wish. So media are both the causes, the consequences, but also the causes of such frameworks. What media clearly do is to multiply dreams or ideal frameworks, what beauty, symmetry, and an excellent body shape should be. Self-esteem and physical activity appear to be associated. Self-esteem and eating disorder behavior are positively associated. And again, this might be one of the key reasons why it's so difficult to treat therapeutically young female adolescents with eating disorders, because basically this eating disorders behavior give them self-esteem, increased self-esteem. The question might be why? Why should eating disorders behavior increase self-esteem? And you know it exactly from your everyday life. Imagine you come home from a very stressing work at the hospital, at work, at the university, and then you detect a package of popcorn or chips or chocolate or candy or cakes in the kitchen. How much brain work you need to resist to such seductions. And now you can imagine if you are able over days and days and days and days to resist to a vital impulse to of food intake, when you're able to push away such a basic uh, mechanism of survival, then you can really say that you're really strong. You really have a high and powerful will. You're able to surpass basic physiological needs. And this most probably will give you a high push on your self-esteem. The next, the last point is that social cultural attitude towards appearance is not related to self-esteem. So if media, my peers and my parents do have or do not have an impact on the way I look to my body, is not related to self-esteem. Next slide. Body dysmorphic disorders and social cultural attitude towards appearance are associated, but the association was extremely low. Perhaps you remember the publication of Ahmad Panna et al. We could not show significant or meaningful correlation coefficient between dimensions of body dysmorphic disorders and the pressure from media to have a certain way, to have a framework of my body shape. And the last point, above all, adolescents and young adults must feel the pressure to score very high on the mating market. And we know that nice body shapes equals to younger age, equals to being genetically still fresh, And then also symmetry also reflects the advantage of giving the impression of a high-end engineering and a highly functional immune system. I mean, it's not by random that above all in countries such as Iran, but also in where all the Western countries, the cosmetic surgery is resistant to economical crises. On the contrary, at least what we see here in Europe is that the number of cosmetic surgery interventions in young people is increasing year by year. So this means that if I'm not able or if I'm not happy with my body shape and with my symmetry, so either I do more physical exercise and I go running every day, or I decrease my food intake, or I have sufficient money to pay the surgeon, um, the surgery, cosmetic surgery. Okay, next slide. Okay, so thank you so much for participating to this talk.
Many thanks, Professor Brand, for your interesting and informative lecture.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
we have time to have some question. If there is any question, please raise your hand. I can open your microphone.
Bitte, sehr gern geschehen. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Please, Dr. Busuri.
Hi, dear Professor Brand. Hi,
Hello.
Dr.
Hello.
Randus. I'm so happy that I could attend this very nice and informative presentation.
You're welcome.
I have a question, and I think some of the take-home messages are not consistent with each other. You said that socio-cultural attitudes toward appearance have nothing to do with self-esteem. So this means that the opinion of society and peers do not affect the self-esteem. Am I right?
At least in our study, yes, we could not show this association. I mean, there was an association of a correlation coefficient of 0.31, but what is a correlation coefficient of 0.31? This is ridiculous. I mean, ridiculous. This is very low. This is low. And so we can say somehow you could also flip a coin or throw the dice. There is an impact, but the impact, or there is an association, not an impact, I'm sorry. There is an association, but the association was actually low.
Okay, so the question is that if the opinion of others does not affect the self-esteem, so why a person has to do physical activity or has to, for example, be involved with eating disorder in order to elevate the self-esteem? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
If
Most probably this is related to own standards and not to standards from others. I also have my own standards, so my personal standards, my personal norms, and it appears that these personal norms must appear to have a higher impact, probably a higher impact on my behavior than what are media showing me as standards.
But I think that the own standards is highly affected by the standards that media is pressing on us. Do you agree with this?
To some extent, yes. I mean, again, the correlation coefficient was 3.301. So it's not nothing, but it's also not that high to say that these associations are tightly related.
The eating disorder or doing physical activity, you said that is highly correlated with the self-standards.
Yes, most probably, yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Chaish Mikonom. Mikonom.
Thank you. Thank you, dear Professor Teranidous.
Thank you, Sophie, for your contribution.
You're welcome.
Is there any other question? Okay, I think
Okay, okay. Okay, again, so thank you so much for participating to this talk. I'm very honored to be allowed to give a talk to your university. I want to give you some impressions. You see in at the end of the room the dress of my wife. Actually, it's the most beautiful wife on this universe, of course. Perhaps also from other galaxies, but we don't have the data. And you can see here the a part of the city of Basel. We are actually living on the 18th floor of a high building, and we do highly enjoy our view over Basel. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for attending this course. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Brand, for your contribution and for your interesting talk.
Okay, you're welcome. Chahish Mikonam.
Goodbye.
Okay, tschüss. Tschüss.
Goodbye.
Tschüss.
Thank you, everybody, for your contribution. Okay. Goodbye.